You know, growing up, there were a lot of things that frightened me as a kid. Things I consider normal for an everyday child to be frightened over. Things that most likely frightened you when you were young as well. Horror movies, horror video games, darkness, being home alone, this monstrosity that every person has heard while watching TV. You know, the usual stuff. But there's something about Flapjack that never sat well with me as a child, and I think in many ways terrified me the most. Watching cartoons as a kid, there was never really anything I thought that was intentionally trying to spook or scare me. So when Cartoon Network started to promote the season premiere of Flapjack, I thought, okay, you got a young boy named after a pancake, his mentor is a blue man that likes to drink maple syrup, has a blue whale for a mom voiced by a sassy black woman, and their goal is to make it to an island that's made entirely out of candy. I'm sold, Cartoon Network. This show will be absolutely harmless. And it was at this moment, ladies and gentlemen, that I made the worst assumption of my 8-year-old life. My petite, prepubescent 8-year-old life. To this day, I hold Flapjack as one of the few shows out there with some of the most horrifying moments in cartoon history. Maybe behind Courage the Cowardly Dog. And honestly, I think may deserve its own video. But is Flapjack truly as horrifying as you and I remember? Or are we all just exaggerating over something that wasn't as scary as we all thought? Well, in this video, I'll be going over some of those horrifying moments that I remember in great detail and why I believe they were so scary. But before I get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and as of the time of this video being dropped, memberships are now available on my channel. For only $1.99, and yes, that is 1 cent less than $2, you can get exclusive perks such as a shout out at the end of my videos, 3 days early access to future ones, and behind the scenes perspectives. I appreciate you regardless though. Now without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start off things hot. We're going to talk about an episode of Flapjack that for me really put the show on the map as to how unhinged and balls to the wall it could really be. And that is how the West was fun. In this episode, it's Flapjack's birthday, and Bubby pushes Knuckles to teach Flapjack a birthday lesson. Flapjack presents Knuckles with a compass, and so Knuckles decides to teach him about direction. On the compass, Flapjack notices that all the directions are present except for that other direction. Knuckles immediately warns Flapjack that going out to the west is forbidden and claims that the edge of the world is out in that direction. Of course, this excites Flapjack even more to want to explore the west, and even convinces Knuckles that the most dangerous part of the world is where Candy Island is located. Knuckles and Bubby are on board, and so they set sail. And immediately things are off on the wrong foot. As they begin to go west, they start to see burning ships, death signs everywhere, this guy, more on him in a sec, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. As they sail further into the west, Flapjack and Bubby start to verbally say west, and this is where the madness begins. They first run into a sea monster that questions if they said the word. Flapjack says it again, and 2 mermaids appear that act as tourists of sorts. Flapjack says it a 3rd time, and some random Asian dude sitting on a sea turtle offers them a french fry. The crew sneaks out of the area, and Flapjack vows to never say west again, only for an even bigger sea monster to devour all of the characters that just appeared. This particular scene, looking back at it now, was more weird and comical than it was scary, but I do think what was most unsettling here were how the characters that appeared here were drawn. They looked like they just didn't belong there, but I'm sure that was the writer's intentions from the start. But that's not the craziest thing that happened though. While Knuckles is asleep, he is unknowingly placed on a makeshift raft made by Flapjack so they can further explore the west for Candy Island. The plan backfires terribly, and they start to suffer from dehydration and insanity.
Seawater makes you crazy!
Look at me! I've been drinking it for hours!
You don't look crazy to me!
But that's not even the worst part yet. Flapjack and Knuckles literally start to hallucinate Candy Island, only for it to be literally the end of the world. And I don't think I can even begin to tell you play by play what happens next, except they go through a legit nightmare. And even the dude from earlier manifests himself out of the sail flag and gives one final gesture before their doom. And so Flapjack and Knuckles fall to their death. Allegedly. The episode essentially ends with it all just being a hallucination, and Flapjack enjoys the rest of his birthday. The end. Now listen. Absolutely the most unsettling part of this episode was the whole idea of the West. It was essentially a different take on the Wild Wild West. The West had an almost supernatural presence here. And yes, while it was goofy at times, parts of it was legitimately horrifying. The way the scene goes from regular to pitch black with a red outline made it look like they were in literal hell. Not to mention that suffering from dehydration, going insane, and being stranded in the middle of the ocean is a real scenario that happens to people. And this guy has a mystique of his own, honestly. Literally, he has an entire fan base because of his role in all of this. He honestly looked like a poor victim of what the West could do to a person. Overall, this episode had a mixture of comedy, with many parts of it that were unsettling and just downright scary. I think as a whole, the writers of Flapjack understood horror. They understood the importance of atmosphere, tone, and knew how to prey on the fears of young children, while also having a lighthearted ending. All of it made for a memorable episode. Knuckles is a filthy rat. This episode had a mixture of everything from comedy to disgust to horror. So the premise of the episode was that Flapjack finds a stray rat in the ocean in which he rescues, befriends, and takes as his pet. This rat, which is hilariously known as Knuckles 2, hence the joke behind the name of the episode, is clearly disease infested. So of course Flapjack decides to show off his new pet to the citizens of Stormalong. This dang rat literally infects the whole harbor area and gives everyone every variant of every virus to ever exist, or just better known as the plague. Knuckles 2 had everyone not named Flapjack looking like failed Resident Evil concepts. Like, I swear I've seen these guys in House of the Dead before. Unless you have a fear of disease, this wasn't the most unsettling part of the episode. The most unsettling part would come at the very end. Literally the end of the episode. As everyone's having a laugh over Flapjack having to give blood in order to provide a cure for Stormalong, the episode closes to black and immediately cuts to an image that still haunts me to this day.
Don't you mean nice to be needled?
Adventure.
Can someone please tell me why on God's green earth did they have to make this image of Flapjack the last thing I saw? As a kid, this just made me very, very uncomfortable. As if we didn't just see an entire episode of extremely grotesque people with the plague. Could you imagine it being the middle of the night? You'll wake up from a deep sleep only to be stunned and shocked by the image of this on your TV? I think what scared me here though was rather a mixture of different things. The rat not only spreading the plague across Stormalong, which had everyone looking like infected zombies, but also Dr. Barber's sinister laughter over this drawing of Flapjack. And you know, when you used to watch TV, the screen would cut to black and for a split second you were left with your own thoughts of what was just shown to you before the next episode? This terrifying moment turned what was essentially a funny episode into an unsettling end. And hence why I chose it as my thumbnail if it remains. You see, it's moments like this in Flapjack where you never can watch the show distracted or half asleep because they sure know how to startle you and wake you up real quick. I'm talking about all of the moments where the characters could be talking about themselves or someone else or just something could be happening, and then it just cuts to the person's face, not only drawn in the ugliest way imaginable, but also the sound of a blood-curdling scream that follows. Seeing a character that was so ugly that the only way to react was to just scream, it caught me off guard as a kid and honestly made me want to scream too. Like the show just had to hit home just how ugly these people were. But looking back at it now, most of these moments are still hilarious and some to this day are still horrifying. This sound effect could make for some really funny memes.
She's here.
Listen, in the show, I know Flapjack was portrayed to be this innocent, happy-go-lucky adventure boy, but this kid at times was legitimately horrifying. And this is in the episode, Oh, You Animal. The premise here is that Flapjack is taken away from Bubby by this old lady who mistakes Flapjack for some lost child. So she puts him in an orphanage with other kids. Bubby plots with Knuckles to essentially break Flapjack out. So boom, right? This lady is worried that Bubby is gonna break into the orphanage to rescue Flapjack. And this is where the nightmare fuel comes back.
Get. Yep. She's here.
Hell no, to the no, 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 hell to the no.
Do I really need to explain why this was so terrifying? It's for the same reasons the Filthy Rat episode I thought was scary. The funny thing is, every time I watched this scene, I felt like it had a essence of horror. It had like a horror movie feel to it, like it was inspired by something. And lo and behold, my suspicions had some weight to them. Apparently in the Flapjack wiki of this episode, that quote that Flapjack said to the lady was inspired by Poltergeist. Freaking Poltergeist.
They're here. She's here.
If this is true, I find it no surprise that the creator of Flapjack would find some type of inspiration from a movie like Poltergeist. Considering how most of what happens in the show is just out there, supernatural, horrific. What makes things worse was that after that scene, Flapjack just reverts back to his regular appearance, as if we didn't just see this kid appear like an abomination. And that's honestly how most of these moments occur. Right out of context, right out of nowhere. And I think the scariest part of it all is, I don't think Flapjack was even trying to be horrifying. I don't even think Flapjack was trying to intentionally be scary. It's just how he was.
No, I don't think she's as sweet as you, Candy Wife. I hate her.
This may be the most mellow out of all my selections, but have you ever thought this while watching the show? What in the world is up with Candy Wife? To me, she always looked unnatural. I mean, you know, considering she was a humanoid candy thing, but her appearance was just always uncanny. It didn't help that most of the time she appeared on screen, she was presented in CGI form, which made her more uncanny. It kind of reminds me of that episode of SpongeBob where they were trying to prank SpongeBob and get him out the house, and they had Patrick dressed up in a gorilla suit, only for the Patrick in the gorilla suit not to be the real Patrick, and the real Patrick only to be a real life person in a gorilla suit. A lot of bizarreness here, but the chase was how unnatural that gorilla was compared to all of the other characters who were obviously hand-drawn. Candy Wife didn't speak at all from what we the viewers saw, and she never was able to put two footsteps together on her own. Of course, she plays as a trophy wife for Peppermint Butler and literal eye candy for everyone else, but the fact that I never seen her physically interact with anybody, it always made me think she had ulterior motives, possibly even sinister. And I've also always wondered though, if Peppermint Butler is married to Candy Wife, does that mean he can put his...
You win! You need to grow up.
Grow up? I'm 38 years old.
That's better. So never stop wishing, Flapjack, and all your dreams will come true. Even the scary ones?
Yes.
Think I know what you want. String!
You think you're ready for my rhymes? You'll soon be green as envious limes. I see you're not yellow, fellow, but I don't want to make you blue. So get a clue and purple the plug before you played, or I'll arrange a rainbow on your parade.
Viewing of this tape is prohibited. Discard it immediately.
For the last episode that I'm going to talk about, it, in my honest opinion, is by far and large the most terrifying, the most horrifying episode in all of Flapjack, and that is school.
Today, class, I'm going to teach you about fear.
This episode was and is everything wrong with Flapjack. It's everything that proves why the show at times was intentionally trying to be scary. It's every reason why this show is still remembered by most based on its sheer horror. And I don't think gets talked about enough, to be honest. The episode immediately starts off with danger. Flapjack and Knuckles are looking for what is said to be candy while inside the literal mouth of 8-Armed Willie. Flapjack assures Knuckles that the map he has can be trusted. Immediately after, it cuts to nothing but severed arms, legs, fingers, and bones, which one could only assume to be the remains of the adventurers who failed to find the quote-unquote treasure. Both are led in the wrong direction, only to be revealed that Flapjack does not know his rights from his lefts. Bubby demands that Knuckles take Flapjack to school the next morning, or he lives somewhere else. Knuckles is a bit reluctant to take Flapjack to school because he believes Flapjack will replace his own thoughts with book smarts and forget about Knuckles. But honestly, I think Knuckles was worried Flapjack would become smart enough to realize Knuckles was no good for him, but that's just my opinion. But anywho, Knuckles is finally persuaded to get Flapjack in class after seeing some, let's just say he saw some pirate booty worth plundering. Fast forwarding a bit, Knuckles decides to sneak inside the school in the middle of the night to steal some candy inside the teacher's desk. A piece of candy suspiciously rolls across the classroom only to reveal that Miss Leading was sitting in the darkness. What appeared to be Miss Leading, sitting in darkness, would actually be a decoy of her.
Miss Leading is a puppet? I feel misled. What is going on here?
Why, Captain Knuckles? You're here early.
The atmosphere and music almost immediately changes to something more horrific and more sinister. And just as Knuckles is about to meet his doom, Flapjack enters the room, which breaks up the tension and allows Willie to escape quickly. And Miss Leading goes back to teaching today's lesson.
Today, class, I'm going to teach you about
Knuckles, who is spooked at this point, tries to warn Flapjack that
the teacher is really
8-Armed Willie?
And what happens next is what I think is the epitome of what makes this show so horrifying.
Are you alright, teacher?
Now remember when I said Flapjack took inspiration from Poltergeist? Well, I think here it's quite possible that they also took inspiration from The Exorcist, a film that some regard as the scariest movie to ever be created. The way here that Miss Leading shakes violently, while 8-Armed Willie can be heard wailing behind the disguise, and seeing Flapjack and Knuckles look in terror, it made me feel like I was watching a demonic possession take place in a kid's show. Not to mention that her eyes almost seem to roll in the back of her head while 8-Armed Willie's tentacle emerges out of her. Also, the way the camera pans around the class to not only show Knuckles' look of fear, but also reveal how the class was turned into a nightmare, made for a bone-chilling scene. It's like Knuckles was being shown a twist of reality that he accidentally walked into over a piece of candy. The students as well are revealed to be merely puppets controlled by Willie. Watching this scene back now, in a way reminded me of Resident Evil Village, where Ethan had to explore the dollhouse and just see how reality for him would become distorted, and how he'd be faced with some of his biggest fears. Willie knows the facade is up, so he reveals his true self to Flapjack and Knuckles. The end seems near for both, until Knuckles orders Flapjack to grab the emergency harpoon that he recognizes is to his left. Flapjack and Knuckles both realize that they now know their rights from their lefts, and thus reveals 8-armed Willie to be misleading this entire time. Allegedly. She claims that her teaching methods may be a bit strange, but it gets the job done. And the episode ends with Flapjack and Knuckles eating candy, while also have learned something. I think the reason why I find this episode to be the most horrifying is because there are still questions and thoughts that I still have about it that remain unanswered. Are we just gonna ignore the corpses and limbs of the adventurers that failed to retrieve the treasure? Who gave Flapjack a map that led them to 8-armed Willie in the first place? Was misleading truly in disguise as 8-armed Willie this entire time? If so, did she really know that Knuckles was gonna break into the classroom in the middle of the night to steal some candy? Thoughts like these still spook me, and even without these concerns, it all was still terrifying to witness, especially as an 8-year-old. And I think gave viewers a glimpse of what the real 8-armed Willie was capable of. For all the moments that I've shared thus far that I thought made the show terrifying, that doesn't take away from the fact that this show was an absolute, no pun intended, marvelous misadventure to watch, and I honestly wouldn't change a single thing about it, no matter how horrifying it was. But of course, I'm one man's opinion. So all of my picks here are subjective, and I'd absolutely love to know what were your most horrifying moments of Flapjack, if you have any. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And don't hate, motivate, and God bless.